Hey everyone, my name's April and I am an alcoholic. My sobriety date is March 5th of 1994. It's a miracle, right? And my home group is the Wrath of Grapes. We're a step-in tradition meeting. We meet in Glen Burnie, Maryland on Monday nights at 8 o'clock. If you're ever out that way, please stop in and see us, because we'd love to have you. And thank you for letting me be here this weekend. It is such a privilege and a pleasure to get to do anything in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I mean that with my whole heart. 20 years ago, I would not have expected ever to mean that. 20 years ago, I wouldn't have expected still to be here. And to me, that's just one more bit of evidence that the loving God of my understanding has in store for me plans far better than anything that I could pick on my own. And in addition to the fact that it's a privilege and a pleasure to get to do anything in AA, this weekend in particular has been really wonderful. I can't thank you all enough, not only for the privilege of being here, but for the way that you've welcomed us in. To Mo, to Candy, to Johnny, to Jerry, to everybody. You all have welcomed us into your hearts and your love. And I'll be forever thankful for that. I'll apologize. I think I'm suffering from the same cold or allergies that Tim had, so I've got some kind of frog in my throat. But there it is. It is what it is. So I'll tell you a little bit about what I was like and what happened and what I'm like today. All of the character defects that are alive and well in me today, all of the character defects that pushed me around in my drinking, that led me to drink, that kept me drinking, they were all alive and well in me from before when I picked up my first drink. I have no idea when my first drink was, but I'll tell you a little bit about what I was like before that. So I was 3 years old. And I promise I'm not going to tell you my whole life story. I promise. But there I am. I'm 3 years old, and my mom sends me off to nursery school, and she puts me in, puts my hair up in pigtails, puts me in little dresses and those shiny black little shoes that little girls wear. And she would say to me, "Oh, honey, you're so cute," because she's my mom. And there I am at the age of 3. And my mom gets called in for a parent-teacher conference. And I intuitively knew this could not be a good thing. And so the teacher sits down with her across from the table, looks at her, and gives out this big sigh. April is a lovely little girl. But whenever one of the teachers says something she doesn't like, she crosses her arms, she stomps her foot, and she says, "Bullshit." And this is really not appropriate in the 3s. Now, I told you, I don't know when my first drink was. I know I hadn't had it then. So what that tells me is as far back as I can remember, I was defiant. I had issues with authority. I didn't want anybody telling me what to do or where or how or when. And I was pretty certain I was the smartest bear in the room. And I'll tell you, none of those qualities served me particularly well during my drinking. And I was also painfully shy growing up. There was nothing harder for me than to walk into a room full of people like this. People who seemed to know how to act and what to wear and how to talk and who to be. People who seemed to fit inside their own skin. I was filled with fear all the time, and I couldn't let you know that. So part of me wanted to be right in the middle of things, and I would talk and act and dress and be the way I thought you wanted me to be so I could try and fit in with you, whoever you were. And part of me wanted to just watch from the outside, from a safe distance, and act like I didn't really care. I didn't have any tools to deal with any of this kind of stuff. Here we talk about a kit of spiritual tools, and that was nowhere in my frame of reference. The simplest way I can describe it for you is to tell you that while I was growing up, my ideas of God were conflicted. And it never, ever, ever crossed my mind that there could be a higher power that I could turn to for help. Me personally, with anything, just was nowhere in my frame of reference. So by the time I'm 12 or 13 years old, I have bad skin. I wear glasses. I have braces on my teeth. I'm kind of chunky. I don't fit inside my own skin. And I'm suffering from a really bad case of adolescence. And somewhere around that time, I found out what a drink would do for me. Like I said, I don't remember what my first drink was, but I can tell you what my first big drunk was like. I grew up in Baltimore and lived not far from the Johns Hopkins campus. And they do the spring fair every year. And so one Saturday morning, I went with some of my friends over to the spring fair, and they had, this big beer garden set up, and I don't remember much. I know that by about 1 or 2 in the afternoon, I was seeing 4 of everything, and I just remember thinking, April, just focus on the Tuborg truck. If you can just get to that truck and get some more beer, man, everything's going to be okay. And I don't know why Tuborg. I assume because they would serve us. And I don't remember much. I don't remember getting sick. I don't know how we got home. I don't remember anything until I came to that night at about 8 or 9 o'clock in the evening. And I thought, I can't wait to do that again. And so I had an older brother. My parents were out of town for the weekend and had left us at home. This is, by the way, a luxury that my children will never, ever, ever enjoy. They are at home this weekend. They're with their grandparents because both of their parents are drunks. So there you have it. Anyway, so 8 or 9 o'clock, I wake up. I think I can't wait to do that again. And I'm feeling kind of queasy from all the beer I've been drinking. So I thought, well, I'll drink Southern Comfort, and it'll be different. And I don't remember getting sick. I don't remember my friends walking me around the neighborhood trying to sober me up. I don't remember anything until I came to the next day, and my friends started reporting back to me. And for the first time, I thought, I did what? With who? For the first time, I felt those waves of shame and guilt and remorse come flooding over me. And more than anything else, I thought, I can't wait to do that again because I loved what the booze would do for me. Here's what it did. I would get a couple drinks. I'd get this warm, tingly glow. It would go out to my fingers. It would go down to my toes. And all of a sudden, I felt as if I was pretty and I was witty and I was sexy and I was smart. All the things that I knew I wasn't, and I was quite certain I was never in life going to be. It relieved me of the bondage of me, is what it did. And I would do anything for that, anything. So that's how my drinking went for the next 13 years until I came to you. I was a puking up, falling down, cross-eyed, sloppy drunk. I was a blackout drinker from the start. I will tell you, I believe that blackouts are proof of God's mercy. And it wasn't long before, if I could remember what I had done the night before, I hadn't had enough to drink. And if you could tell me, then you hadn't either, and I didn't want to drink with you anymore, And at the same time, there was something in me that had to spend an awful lot of time and energy trying to prove something to you. I remember when I came into this program, and I first read Bill's story in the big book, and he talks about having to be a number 1 man. I could relate to that. It seemed to me that all my time and energy was spent trying to achieve something. If I could just achieve enough, then I could prove to you, to the world, to me, something. And then I wouldn't feel so empty inside. And so I worked really hard at school, and I did really well in school. I worked hard at sports, and I did well in sports. I got good jobs. I had responsibility, and I would point to all these things. And now, mind you, I'd never been to this program before. Our first step talks about powerlessness and unmanageability. I'd never been here before, but instinctively, there's this thing in me. I'm clinging to manageability. Powerless was okay. I was powerless from that first drunk. I was okay with powerless as long as I'm managing well. And I invested a lot of energy into managing well. Because then nobody has a right to talk to me about my drinking. I'm fine. And so I went off to college, and something in my drinking changed. By the time I was about 20, I wasn't getting quite as much of the warm, tingly glow anymore. I would lay my head down on the pillow at night, and my thoughts would start racing. I had this great big cloud of doom hanging over my head. I didn't know what was coming, but I knew it was going to be bad. And I was filled with the shame and the guilt and the remorse of all of the things that I had been doing. And the only way that I knew how to make this go away was to take a drink. Now, meanwhile, mind you, I am still clinging hard to chasing the warm, tingly glow. So I was the captain of the speed drinking team in college. We had that. It was an organized sport. It was, a competition amongst the different dorms. And we practiced every night. We went down to this little basement. It had, there was There were full kegs and empty kegs and full kegs, and it smelled like urine and it smelled like vomit. And I mean, this was my kind of place. And so we'd go down to this basement every night and we would practice. And since it was a speed drinking game, we had, regulation-sized glasses, and you had to drink them in a certain amount of time and whatever. So at any rate, at that point in time, I could drink that regulation-sized glass of beer in 9/10 of a second, timed on a stopwatch. I can tell you I would not be able to drink a glass of water that fast today. And every once in a while, somebody would say to me, April, how do you do that? Now, I'm thinking they're looking at me with some kind of admiration, right? I'm not sure that's what that look was. Anyway, somebody would say, April, how do you do that? And I would say, it's easy. You just have to want it. And I meant that with my whole heart, because there was nothing I wanted more than the way I was going to feel when I got enough of that beer in me. So when I came to you all some years later and you asked me if I was willing to go to any lengths to stay sober, I didn't know exactly what it would mean, but I knew what it meant to go to any lengths to drink, because I had done that all the way up until I came to you when the booze wasn't working anymore. At the same time, while I'm trying to chase that warm, tingly glow, and I've got the cloud of doom hanging over my head, I also started to have those moments where my cover was blown, where that manageability I was clinging to so hard was starting to slip a little bit. And our book talks about how some of us have a knack for getting drunk at positively the wrong time. And so I remember one particular evening, we were all dressed up. It was a celebration of a, kind of big deal. And, there I am in a dress and pearls and heels. And I don't remember much beyond going out with my friends and then puking up in front of the cop who called the ambulance to take me to the detox. And I was furious. I was furious at them, because they blew my cover. I'd been way drunker plenty of times. All I needed to do was go home and sleep it off like I did every other night. I was completely incapable of taking responsibility for my own actions. I was furious with them. And I remember I came back from that detox with two really clear thoughts. And the first one was, man, I better get this thing under control. Because the second thought was, if I don't, I might have to give it up. And I couldn't imagine life without drinking. I couldn't understand how you get through a day, how you get through anything if you don't have a drink. So that idea that I was going to control and enjoy my drinking got planted pretty hard. And for the next 5 years, I tried everything I could think of to control and enjoy my drinking. I genuinely believed that the problem was outside of me. I genuinely believed with my whole heart that if you had my family, you would drink. If you went to the schools I went to, you would drink. If you had my roommates, you would drink. If you had my jobs, you would drink. If you had my boyfriends, you would drink. I believed this. It wasn't until you all showed me how to take inventory in a fourth and fifth step that I started to learn the delusion in that. So for the next 5 years, I moved 11 times to 7 cities and 3 states on both coasts because I thought the problem was outside of me. And everywhere I was, I drank. And with every drink I took, I got a little emptier inside. And I'll tell you what my drinking was like. Our book talks about Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, how some of us, when drinking, we resemble our normal selves but little. And I remember reading Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde before I got sober. And the way I remember it, it goes something like this. Dr. Jekyll is this fine, upstanding guy. He's a pillar of the community. He walks little old ladies across the street. And he also has this funny hobby, mixing up chemicals on the side. He likes to put together a potion, drink it down, and see what it does. And I could relate to that. And one day, he mixes up a potion, he drinks it down, and he is on fire. He feels alive like he's never felt before. A few hours pass. He can't remember a thing that happened in between. The drink wears off, and he thinks, man, I can't wait to do that again. I could relate to that. And he starts chasing the potion. And over time, he starts to hear about this monster out in this community, this Mr. Hyde, who goes out and does these terrible, despicable, unspeakable things. And because of the timing, he starts to suspect that when he takes that drink and doesn't know what happens in between, that just maybe Mr. Hyde is him. But It just feels so good that he doesn't want to stop. So here's the kicker. One day, he hasn't had a thing to drink. He turns into Mr. Hyde, and he can't change back. That's what my alcoholism was like. Our book talks about selfishness and self-centeredness. That is the root of my problems. It doesn't say, and then I put down a drink, and it was no longer a problem. It's still the root of my problems today, and that's what left me so baffled when I came to you. Because here's what my alcoholism looked like. I was a puking up, falling down, cross-eyed, sloppy drunk. That was fine. I told you, powerless was fine as long as I was managing well. But I was also someone who, when my employers didn't pay me what I thought I was worth, I supplemented my income out of their till. I knew it was stealing. I knew it was wrong every time I took their money. You know what? I never once stole from that job drunk. I never once showed up at that job drunk. Every time I stole their money, I was physically as sober as I am tonight. But I was suffering seriously from a case of untreated alcoholism. I had a great big alcoholic chip on my shoulder. I justified it every way I could think of. I need it more than they do. If only they paid me what I was worth. If only they paid me what they promised me. If only I did the work I promised them. Everybody else is doing it. I justified it every way from Sunday. And yet, every time I stole their money, not only was I physically as sober as I am tonight, but I knew it was stealing, I knew it was wrong, and I'd go home and I'd lay my head down on the pillow at night, and in addition to that great big cloud of black doom hanging over my head, telling me I don't know what's coming, but I know it's going to be bad, I'm also filled with the shame and the guilt and the remorse of the things I'm doing as sober as I am tonight. I became someone who, when my only brother got married, I couldn't be bothered to go to the wedding. And it's not like I got drunk and didn't show up. I was living on the West Coast by this time, and he lived in Maryland. And he told me when the date was. And so I already had something planned for that day. And I figured if he wanted me at his wedding, he could change the date. So there was a little bit of self-centeredness in that, you know. And here was the thing. I'd had a resentment against him since I was 2 because I thought Mom and Dad loved him better, which wasn't true, and even if it had been, would have been a serious case of misdirected anger. But in any event, I didn't know about any of that stuff until you all showed me how to take inventory in 4 and 5. And the point is, it's not like I got drunk and didn't show up. Every day for 3 months, I knew I wasn't going to his wedding, because every day for 3 months, I didn't make any plans to get there. And I justified it every way from Sunday, and I would lay my head down on the pillow at night, and I would have no choice but to drink, because I couldn't stand who I'd become. So finally, at the end of my drinking, I was 26 years old. I was living less than a mile from the beach in San Diego, California. And it was just me and my dog. And it couldn't be my family's fault that I drank because they were 3,000 miles away. Couldn't be my job's fault that I drank. Some people I worked with drank like me, but a lot of them didn't. Couldn't be my boyfriend's fault that I drank because I had run out of those. And that was a blessing, really. And there was nothing else to point to outside of me. And here was the real kicker. The booze stopped working. I was really confused about that when I came into AA and I heard people say that the booze stopped working for them. I'll tell you what it meant for me. I could be slurring my words, falling down, puking up, doing all the things I usually did when I drank. But I wasn't getting a warm, tingly glow. And more importantly, I wasn't getting any sense of relief. All the time, it seemed, as far back as I could remember, there had been this constant series of voices up here in my head telling me, it's just that constant self-centered yammer, you know, about how I don't fit in, about how I'm going to get found out, about how if you knew who I really was, you wouldn't want to be with me because I don't know who I am, but I don't want to be with me. And by the way, I love it that at AA meetings I can talk about the voices in my head because I really can't talk about that with the people I work with. Just saying. Anyway, so it wasn't quieting down all that noise in my head. It wasn't taking away the big cloud of doom. It wasn't giving me any relief. It was no longer relieving me of the bondage of me. And that didn't keep me from trying to chase it. So the drunk that got me here was not a spectacular one, but I'll tell you about it because it was a good lesson in powerlessness for me. It was a Friday night. There was a party with the people I worked with, and it was one of these obligatory things. All I had to do was put in an appearance and then go home and get drunk on my sofa like I did every other night. And And it wasn't a good party. It wasn't a bad party. I was not going to drink. My bosses were there. I knew how I drank. I was not going to humiliate myself in front of these people. I'd lost one good job that way. And I had really good reason not to drink. So nothing in particular going on except that I look around the room and I see other people getting the sense of ease and comfort that comes from taking a few drinks. And I think, I'll just have one. Now, I've never wanted one, but I'm powerless. And so that thought comes to mind, and I believe the lie, and I get one of those big plastic tumblers, and I fill it up with rum, and I top it off with a little Diet Coke. And I can't tell you the bars we went to that night. I don't remember getting sick. I don't know who took me home, and I can't tell you who put me to bed. And one more time, those waves of shame and guilt and remorse came flooding over me. And when I came to the next day, a friend called me on the phone, and she said, April, what happened? And I told her the truth. I said, I didn't know. I didn't mean for that to happen. And that pretty much summed up my drinking. I didn't mean when I got drunk to say hateful things to people who cared about me. I didn't mean when I got drunk for my friends to find me passed out on the street downtown at 3 a.m. I didn't mean for these things to happen. And I hung up the phone with her. And this time I didn't feel just hungover. I felt like something inside of me had been poisoned all the way through. Now I tell you what, that Friday night is the last drink I've had up to this date. I was confused about the idea of a bottom when I came in here. I heard a lot of people who had these spectacular stories about their bottom. And I thought, well, I don't know, my last drunk was pretty tame, so I don't know if I qualify, I tell you what, looking back today, I can tell you that on that date, I had hit pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization. But it wasn't the first time I'd been there. That day I came back from the detox when I was on top of the world the night before, I'd hit pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization. The day I came to, when my friends found me passed out on the streets downtown, I had hit pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization. I don't know exactly where the bottom is. I just know that at that moment, I was empty enough inside to be willing to let God's grace come in. And I'm grateful for that because, if I pick up another drink, the next bottom I hit, I might be dead. And I don't want to die that way, So I didn't get any hope, but I didn't drink. And it's funny. The one thing I remember after hanging up the phone with that friend was thinking, for the first time that I can remember, thinking, God, I don't want to live this way anymore. And I didn't really intend it to be a prayer. I told you, I didn't have anywhere in my frame of reference the idea of a God that I could turn to. I was pretty sure there was a God. I was quite certain that I was too bad for God, that I was too sick, I was too wrong, I was too far gone, I'd done too many other things. I didn't intend it to be a prayer. But the God of my understanding is merciful enough and loving enough to answer something that I didn't know was a prayer. And the way I know he answered it is I haven't had a drink since then. I have a friend who says all the time, well, how do you know it's God that keeps you sober? And the answer is because God's the only one that he asked. And that works for me. So I didn't get any hope, but I didn't take a drink. The very next night, I'm at home in my little cave with the blinds drawn and the door locked, and just me and my dog, and I'm trying to fend off the voices in my head. And I'm listening to this radio call-in show, and this guy calls in to say he thinks he has a problem with his drinking. And on the outside, we had nothing in common. Every fact and circumstance of our lives was completely different. But when he talked about breaking promises even to himself, when he talked about not being able to look at himself in the mirror or look anybody else in the eyes, when he talked about not knowing how his life had turned out this way, when he talked about feeling so filthy inside he didn't think he could ever come clean, when he talked about those things, it was like this light bulb went off in my heart. And for the first time, I thought, maybe this has something to do with my drinking. Now, I'll tell you, other people had suggested to me in the past that it might have something to do with my drinking, but this was the first time I ever thought it. And The next thing I knew, I was on the phone with Alcoholics Anonymous, and the woman who took my call became my first sponsor. So here's what happened. At almost midnight on a Sunday night, there was a sober member of AA who was answering phones for the central office in San Diego, and that man's willingness changed my life. That man asked me if I thought I could make it through the night without having a drink, and I said yes, and he said he'd have a sober woman call me back. So at almost midnight on a Sunday night, the woman who became my first sponsor is sitting at home, and she had about 7 years sober at the time. She had a husband, she had a couple of kids, she had a job, she had a full and busy life, and AA was right in the center of it. So the phone rings at almost midnight on a Sunday night, and she tells her husband, honey, if it's for me, tell them I'm asleep. Tell them I'm dead. I don't care what you tell them. And he said, it's Alcoholics Anonymous. She said, oh, give me the damn phone. And her willingness changed my life. You all have shown me again and again and again since I've come to you that staying sober a day at a time and living to good purpose a day at a time and living joyfully most of the time has very little to do with what I want to do at any given moment. It has everything to do with what actions I'm willing to take. And it really doesn't matter how I feel about it. The magic is in the action. So we met the next day for a meeting, and I had never been here to you all before. The only thing I knew about AA was I knew you all fixed drunks. And the way I knew that was that I had a grandfather who had gotten sober in AA before I was born. And I didn't know if I was a drunk, but I knew you all fixed them. And I remember I walked into that meeting, and I was so scared, and I was so ashamed. You know, I hadn't showered in 3 days, and I stank. You could still smell the booze I was sweating out, and I was 26 years old, and I'm walking into an AA meeting, and I'm thinking, oh, my God, it doesn't get any worse than this, you know, and my life is over, and I'm never going to have fun again. But mostly I was scared and ashamed. And in walks this woman with the most beautiful eyes I had ever seen. They sparkled. They danced. And more than anything else, she looked to me like she was somebody who fit inside her own skin. And I remember thinking, I was like, what is she, a counselor or something? She doesn't look like me. She doesn't look like how I feel. And she told me her name, and she told me she was alcoholic, and she started telling me about herself. And with every word she said, I kept thinking, how did you know? She knew me better than I knew myself. And so it was funny. I look back on that meeting now, and I'm thinking to myself, well, I think about a lot of things when I look back on that meeting. So I'd never been here before. She warned me in advance. She said, April, when you go into this meeting, this particular one is an open meeting. It doesn't matter if you think you're an alcoholic or not. The doors are big enough for you to walk through. You're going to hear people say their name. Some people say their first name. Some people say their first and last name. You can make up a name if you want. It's really okay. She said, you'll hear some people say they're alcoholics. You can identify that way if you want to, but you don't have to. She said, you're going to see a basket passed during the meeting. You don't have to put anything in. We don't charge anything for this. She said, you're going to hear a prayer at the end of it, but that's okay. You can join in the prayer if you want, or if you know the words, and if you don't want to, that's okay. Before I walked in the doors of my first meeting, she was introducing me to these traditions that hold our fellowship together all around the world. And what is it, 140 countries now? It's funny, I remember I was watching the Olympics, some years ago, and I remember watching, the Parade of Nations they do with the flags, and there were 202 nations competing in the Olympics that year, and I was sober, 2 or 3 or 4 years, whatever it was when I was watching them. And I remember thinking, wow, 202 nations competing in the Olympics, and AA's in 140. We've got a lot of work to do. We've got a lot of work to do. Because when I reached out for help, you all were there. I can't personally be there in a foreign country that speaks another language that I don't know. But I do know that if I put money in the basket in my home group when it comes around, and I make sure I put in enough, not just to cover the coffee that I drank that night or the rent that we paid the church for that month, but also enough to send on to the General Service Office in New York as well. I know they can take care of translations so that somebody in a country that I've never met has the same shot at sobriety that you all gave me. Anyway, so there we are. We finished up that meeting, and looking back, I'm thinking to myself, they probably had a literature table, but she said, you know what, we really should get you a big book. Why don't you ride with me out to the central office? We'll go pick one up for you. Now, the central office was, I don't know, half hour, 45 minutes away. And I'm looking back and I'm thinking, this was pretty clever. So she had me there in her car. And what she showed me was that AA was bigger than the meeting I had just gone to. That even as absorbed in myself as I was, she took me to the place that was making sure that everybody in the San Diego metropolitan area had a meeting directory, could get literature, that it was bigger than me. And we got a copy of the big book, and she said, April, you're going to hear it's a program of suggestions. She suggested to me that I circle the word must every time it appeared, and she told me to look for all the promises, not just the ones that come after step 9. And we started going through the steps, and you know, it was funny. When I put down a drink, I have never been so obsessed with drinking as I was in those first few months. Because I'd never really honestly tried to stop before. I had tried to manage well, but I'd never honestly tried to stop drinking before. She said, April, she said, I don't know if you're an alcoholic or not. I desperately wanted her to tell me. Because I tell you what, if there had been a Plenty Wrong Anonymous, I'd have said, sign me up, you know. And she said, April, I don't know if you're an alcoholic. If you don't know, step up to a bar, start drinking, stop abruptly, and try it more than once. It'll be worth it to get convinced. And when she said that, it sent this cold shot of terror through my guts. More than anything in life, I did not want to drink. And she said, well, I tell you what, April, she said, if you're an alcoholic and you keep drinking, it'll get worse and you'll die. I'm not sure if I believed her. I was 26 years old. I was in good health, and I was still clinging to a job that was my piece of manageability. And I'm not sure if I believed that I personally would die if I drank again. But something inside of me was about as close to dying as I was willing to let it get. And you know, you don't have to be here long to watch somebody walk out, pick up a drink, and die. I hope I never forget a woman who I used to sponsor off and on for about, 5, 6, 7 years, something like that. And she'd come in for a little while, and she'd stay sober for a little while. And she'd go back out and she'd pick up a drink. And she'd come back in, and every time she came back in, you could see it in her eyes. A little piece of her was missing, and there was a little bit more crazy there. And she'd stay for a little while, and she'd go back out and she'd pick up a drink, and she'd come back in, and every time there was a little bit less of her and a little bit more of the insanity. And she and I were the same age, and we were both 34 when she drank herself to death. And I hope I never forget what it was like being there at her funeral. There are two things that stand out for me. One is the fact that even in death, she was so battered by this disease. There was no amount of makeup that the undertaker could put on that could make her look at peace. And the other thing I remember was the pain in her mother's eyes as she buried her child. Don't tell me we only hurt ourselves. And I don't want to die that way. So that sponsor of mine told me that if I was alcoholic and I wanted to stay sober, that you all had a way of living that was beyond my wildest dreams. I was welcome to it. If I wanted what you had, I should do what you did. I was welcome to come on along and join you. And I started doing that. And you know, it's funny. I genuinely did not believe this program would work for me. Because I was so filthy inside, I thought I would never come clean. Because I thought I was far too bad for any kind of God. Because I thought I was too sick and too wrong, and I'd just done too many other things. And here's what I found out. The steps don't care if I believe in them or not. If I do them, I'm guaranteed the results. And, I can climb up onto the roof of this building. Gravity doesn't really care if I believe it in or not, right? I can climb onto the roof, I can jump off, and I can flap my arms, and I can say, I can fly, I can fly, I can fly. And you know what? I'm still going to break my leg when I hit the ground. So gravity doesn't care if I believe in it or not, and neither do the steps. If I do them, I get the results. And what a miracle that is. So I started following her around. All that shyness came back, that fear of people came back 1,000 times stronger when I wasn't drinking. The hardest thing in the world for me was to walk into an AA meeting where you all seemed to know how to talk and act and dress and be and seemed comfortable inside your own skin. And that sponsor showed me that if I got to the meeting early, I only had to shake one hand at a time. And that wasn't nearly as scary as walking into the room when you all were already there. I couldn't look you all in the eyes. It seemed like you all were looking right through me. So if I was there early, I would try to get really busy doing things like, finding chairs to straighten or spilled coffee to clean up or something, anything. And I did it because I was scared of you. I did it because I wanted you to like me. I did it because I didn't fit inside my own skin. And here's what the 7-step prayer tells me, is that when I offer all of me to God, the good and the bad, God can use my character defects to good purpose. And God has done that for me again and again and again. So here's what would happen. I would be really busy trying to find spilled coffee to clean up or chairs to put away that didn't really need straightening just because I couldn't look at you. Every time I did something like that, for just those tiny moments, my feelings of uselessness and self-pity would disappear. And I wanted more of that. I was sober about 45 days when I started answering phones in the central office where I was living. And I was terrified. The phone would ring and I'd think, oh my God, don't let the phone ring because I don't know what I'm going to say if the phone rings. I mean, what if they need to know where a meeting is and I don't know where a meeting is? And what if it's a 12-step call? I don't know what to say to them. I mean, I don't have anything to give them and I don't have to actually talk to them. I just have to put them in touch with somebody who can talk to them. But what if I get the number wrong? And what if, I was 45 days sober. So it's, right? Anyway. And so the phone would ring and I'd be terrified and I'd take a deep breath and I'd say, Alcoholics Anonymous, this is April. How can I help? And for just those moments, my feelings of uselessness and self-pity would disappear. And I wanted more of that. I was sober about 60 days, and I was in a meeting, and somebody said, April, you see that girl over there? She's new, and she needs a ride. Can you take her home? And I had a car, and I had a driver's license. And I'm immediately thinking, oh, my God, she's 20 minutes in the opposite direction, and what am I going to say to her? And, yammer with the voices in my head. And but by this time, I'd been sober long enough to know that if I was asked to do something else, do something in AA, I should say yes, because otherwise, you'd kick me out and I would drink and die. So, which, by the way, is not true. If you're new here, you cannot be kicked out of AA. We have some concepts that talk about that. Anyway, but I wanted y'all to like me, so I said yes. And so I take this girl to where she's staying, and it turns out that it's some kind of halfway house or something like that. And she said to me, well, how long have you been sober? I said, 60 days. She said, wow. She said, I can't get a week. What are you doing? And so I told her I had a home group. I gave her a copy of my meeting directory. We talked for a little bit. I don't remember what we said. I just know when I dropped her off that night, my feelings of uselessness and self-pity had disappeared, and I wanted more of that. I was sober about 90 days when I called up that grandfather, and he was the first person in the family who I told. And, I had to get some time under my belt first, so I waited till I had 90 days. And I said, Granddaddy, I'm in AA. He said, that's wonderful. And I thought, oh, my God, the old guy has cracked, Like, did you hear what I said? He said, that's wonderful. He said, do you have a home group? And I said, yes, because I did. He said, well, good. He said, do you have a sponsor? I said, yes, because I did. He said, well, good. He said, are you doing the steps? And I said, yes, because we'd started on them. He said, well, good. He said, those promises they read at some meetings, those come after step 9. If you want the promises to come true in your life, you got to do the steps. And he made it that simple for me. It was a carrot and a stick. The carrot, of course, was you all were promising me, well, you promised me a lot of things. You promised me a life beyond my wildest dreams, which I frankly didn't believe at that point in time. But more importantly, you promised me I didn't ever have to drink again if I didn't want to. And that one I was willing to take a chance on. And of course, you also promised me if I didn't do these things, my butt was going to go back out and drink. And more than anything in life, I did not want to drink again. So by the time I was 5 months sober, I was in the middle of my 9th step. We'd gone through them in order, using the big book, using the 12 and 12. And something remarkable had happened. A lot of remarkable things had happened. And among them was I really wanted to move back home to Maryland, to where my family was. Some of the greatest harm that I had done to my family during my drinking was just pushing them out of my life, because I couldn't bear for them to see what I had become. And so a lot of really well-meaning people said, April, don't make any big decisions in your first year of sobriety. You might get drunk. That might be good advice. I wouldn't know because I didn't take it. However, I did talk to my sponsor. And here's what she finally said. She said, April, here's the deal. You have spent your whole life run by fear. And the deal with sobriety is you don't have to live that way anymore. You can do anything you want in sobriety, so long as you're willing to face the consequences. And if things don't turn out the way you planned, you don't get to blame God, and you don't get to drink. And she guaranteed me that as long as I kept God and the steps in AA in the center of my life, I was going to be okay no matter what. It wasn't going to matter a whole heck of a lot whether I lived on the West Coast or the East Coast or, had this home group or that home group. If I kept God and the steps in AA in the center of my life, I'd be okay no matter what. And armed with that, I moved back home. And I'd been there, well, I've been drunk a long time, so I'm going to sober up here. Because I want to tell you a little bit more about the last 20 years, too, and not just the first couple months. So I moved back home and got to move in with my family and got to start making the daily amends of being part of my family. And so it was funny. I was sober, I guess, 9 months when I finished making all the direct amends that I could. And here's what I remember about that. I remember I felt like I was dancing on clouds. I knew I was finally free, that there was nowhere in the world I would walk down the street where if I saw somebody coming the other way, I would duck and hide and turn the other way and think, oh my God, not that person, I can't see them right now. And I was sober about 10 months when my sponsor said, well, April, you got to give it away to keep it. And I was terrified. I said, I'm not qualified to sponsor someone. And she said, April, God doesn't want your ability. God wants your availability. Just share your experience, especially with the 12 steps. Don't pretend to know something you don't know. And for God's sakes, don't lie. And I got introduced to the joy that comes with watching somebody else find their own path to the God of their understanding that can keep them away from a drink, to watching the lights come on in somebody else's eyes. And so there I am. I'm 10 months sober. And I'm unemployed. Well, barely employed. Anyway, mostly unemployable. Barely employed, living with my parents, and trying to learn how to practice these principles in all my affairs, going to a lot of AA meetings. And I'm sitting in a meeting one day, and I sit behind this guy who I think has nice shoulders. And so I found out where his home group was, and I started going there. And I want you to know, I was thinking only spiritual thoughts. And so this month, it'll be 18 years that we've been married. And it's pretty amazing. And we get to practice these principles in our home. We get to trudge this road together. And what a blessing. What an incredible blessing to get to do that. We have 2 amazing kids who've never seen mom and dad drink. We have a daughter who's 16 and a son who's 12. And I tell you what, I learn a lot about the God of my understanding from watching my kids. So I remember when our daughter was about 18 months old, it was wintertime, and I would dress her in little turtlenecks to keep her warm. And she hated it when I would take her shirts off, because I'd pull it overhead, and that tight collar would always get stuck. And so the shirt is, halfway up over her head. It's covering her face. She's flailing her arms, and she's shouting, stuck, And I'm trying hard not to laugh because I know she's in distress, but I also know she's okay. And I'm thinking to myself, I know this is how God sees me. I'm like stuck, And I can just hear God saying, honey, just be still. Let me help. Just be still. Our son was about 5 or 6 when we discovered that he was having his own challenges, trying to control and enjoy his sugar habit. And so, here he was. He's 5 or 6 years old, and most of the time, if I was home, he wanted to be with me. He wanted me to play something with him. He'd be like, mommy, let's do something. And every once in a while, I'd be home with him, and the house would get really quiet. And I would think, I wonder what's going on. And I'd go upstairs to his room, and he'd have the door locked. And I'd say, are you in there? He'd say, what? I said, well, come on, honey, let me in. And so there I would find him, sitting on the floor with a pair of scissors surrounded by candy wrappers. And I would say to him, honey, come on, that's no good for you. It's going to rot your teeth. It's going to give you a tummy ache. Come on, if you're hungry, let's get you something that's good for you. And I know this is how I look to God. Because when I've got God in the steps in AA right in the center of my life, I want to be snuggled up with the God of my understanding. I want that closeness. And you know what? Every time I get back into self and I start thinking, oh, that looks shiny over there. Oh, maybe that'll make me feel better. As soon as I go and pick up one of my character defects, I lock the door to my room I'm perfectly happy to have God on the other side. And I sit there with my candy, and I eat until I rot my teeth and my stomach hurts, and then I'm ready to let God in and show me something healthier to do, you know? And here's the thing. All those years, I thought I had to be perfect for God. I had to be good enough. I had a sponsor who had me look up words in the dictionary, which I thought was kind of insulting because, you know, a lot of the words in the steps are really short. They're like one syllable, you know. But anyway, I didn't want to drink and die, so I did it. So she had me look up words in the dictionary, and I discovered that grace is an unmerited gift from God. It's freely bestowed. There's nothing I can do to earn it. All I can do is be thankful for it. And what you all have shown me every day is that not only is gratitude a warm, fuzzy feeling, which I love, but gratitude is action, and gratitude is a choice I get to make every day. So, learning from you all these things, I watch my kids and I think, I don't know, when my son was on a candy binge at the age of 5 and my daughter was screaming stuck at the age of 1, I still loved them. Maybe there's a God big enough to love someone even as broken as me. So I'll tell you just a couple more stories. When I came to you all, while I was still drinking, I told you I was working hard on managing well. And a lot of my identity was wrapped up in what I did for a living. I moved back to Maryland. I had to get relicensed in the field that I was in. And it took a long time to do that. And they weren't sure if they wanted somebody with a history like mine, a drunk like me, to go back to the kind of work that I did. So it was about 2 years. I didn't know how that was going to turn out. And I was thinking to myself, you know, I was doing better materially when I was drinking, you know, like what gives? And you all would always point me to the same line in the big book, the one that says, material progress always follows spiritual progress. It never precedes it. And I'd be like, all right, God, you know I need a job, so send me another new girl. And here's what happened. By the time I was able to go back to that kind of work, what I did was no longer who I was. Because what I had learned from you by showing up here a day at a time was that the highest rank I get in Alcoholics Anonymous is child of God. And I had that the day I walked in the door. I just didn't know it. Once upon a time, I thought that the highest rank you get in AA is sober. I don't believe that today. I believe it's child of God. And so a few years go on, and I do some other things for work, and I don't know, I was some years sober, I don't remember how many, and I decided I wanted to go back to school for something that had been this, lifelong dream. I always wanted to do it ever since I was a kid. And I spent a couple years going to school, and got done with that, and started trying to make a living at it, and I discovered a couple things. I discovered that it wasn't all that I thought it would be. I didn't enjoy it as much as I thought it would. It was a lot harder than I thought it would be. And I wasn't nearly as good at it as I thought it would be, as I thought I would be. And most of all, I learned that it was okay to fail. It was okay to show up and fail. I didn't know that. Up until then, there were all kinds of things that I wanted to do. But if I couldn't be certain that I was going to succeed, I would dream about it, I would think about it, I would talk about it, but I was too scared to try. And what you all have shown me is that anything worth doing is worth doing badly. And what I mean by that is that I show up, I do the next right thing, and I put the results in God's hands. And when I do that, it all works out for good. Our family had the opportunity a few years ago. Well, I'll tell one more story, if I can do it without coughing. So I've had the opportunity over the years to do a lot of service in AA. I have found that the joy is in the service. And flash forward, here it is, 20 years later. And now I'm in a job that's kind of a muckety-muck job. My name is in big letters on a brass plate on the door to my office. And there's people who work for me and other people who I work for. And we have a shared sense of purpose. I get to bring the traditions into work every single day. I get to show up with a sense of unity at work every single day. I get to show up in service every single day. I know that my job is to make it possible for everybody who works for me to do their jobs. My job is to be of service to them so we can all achieve a common good. 20 years ago, I thought my job was about me. And you all have changed me. You all have shown me that the very best, the example that I strive to live by and what it means to be effective at work or in leadership of any kind comes from the ninth concept. It's a great piece of literature. It's well hidden. It's in the service manual. I highly recommend it. Best kept secret in AA. So a few years back, our family got the opportunity to move overseas for work. We lived in England for 3 years, and AA was different there. But everybody still spoke the language of the heart. It was the same big books, the same steps, the same traditions, the same concepts. And at its heart, it was still one drunk talking to each other, to another, sharing experience, strength, and hope. So I remember one day, I guess maybe the kids were in school and Dave and I had the day off. I don't remember. Anyway, my husband and I went down to Winchester Cathedral. And you know, from Bill's story, he's there in Winchester Cathedral and he has this moment of, something, and he's standing by the tombstone with the Hampshire Grenadier who caught his death drinking cold small beer, and there we were, and we got to take our picture next to the tombstone with the Hampshire Grenadier, and it was amazing. It was one of those pinch me moments, yes, indeed, my life has been beyond my wildest dreams, and I don't know how it turned out this way. So that tombstone sits out in front of the cathedral, and you have to picture this. The cathedral is 1,000 years old, and it towers over the city, even today. 1,000 years ago, it must have towered over it even more so. A small, countryside building surrounding it. And it would have been a sign of wealth and of reverence to God, And there's beautiful stained glass windows on the front of the church. And I was looking at them, and I thought, gosh, I can't tell really what those are. I mean, I was expecting maybe a picture of saints or, some kind of story from, the Bible or something. But I'm looking, and it's not making any sense to me. We get a little closer. And I realize what's happened. So back in the 1600s, England had a civil war. During that war, there were cannons fired on the town of Winchester, and the windows of the cathedral got shot out. All the glass was shattered. So here's this little farming village, this massive cathedral, and it's been devastated. Well, the people can't possibly afford the cost and the expense of trying to recreate the windows as they once were. But what they do is they go to the land surrounding, all the land around the building, and they pick up one little shard of glass after another. And they collect them all, and they find a way to reassemble them, however they'll fit. And if you look at those windows today, it's this crazy quilt. It's this crazy contemporary art-looking abstract design. It doesn't make any sense. It's just the way the shards would fit back together. It's stunning. It's breathtaking. It took my breath away. And it's not what the designers intended. It's not what the architects had in mind. It's not what the artist first created. But it's what all those hands together did to bring good from the situation that they had. To me, that's an awful lot like what I've experienced here in AA. I showed up here broken. Absolutely broken, empty inside, done. And you all picked up all those little shards of my life, all the things I had shattered, all the things I had torn, all the things that were dirty inside of me. And you started finding ways to piece it back together. You've created for me a life that I never would have planned, that I never would have dreamed. It's far more beautiful than anything I could have predicted. And I get it to see it every day in your lives, too. I don't know what's going to happen in life, but you've shown me again and again that if I place it in God's hands, God always brings something good from it. And I thank you for my sobriety. I thank you for my life. And I thank you for this weekend.